3 days. That's how much time I had to prepare for a talent show performance I never signed up for. My sister thought she was being funny, but joke's on her. I turned her prank into my moment. And sometimes stubborn beats talented every single time. What happened on that stage was a beautiful mess of misspelled programs, hand-drawn chickens, and dance moves that defied every law of coordination. But here's why it worked, and why it changed everything for me. It all started on what should have been a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. The discovery that changed everything. I had my Tuesday mapped out perfectly. First period history, where I'd sit in the back row and take notes without raising my hand. Lunch at the corner table with my sandwich and a book. Maybe catch up on some reading during study hall. Simple. Predictable. Safe. The kind of day where nobody notices you exist, and that's exactly how you want it. But middle school has this way of destroying your plans before you even finish unwrapping your granola bar. I was walking past the main hallway bulletin board when I saw the bright yellow poster screaming Spring Talent Showcase in letters that could probably be seen from space. Below it was a long sheet of paper with names scrawled in different handwriting. Kids were clustered around it, pointing and whispering and doing that thing where they pretend to be excited, but really they're just hunting for ammunition to mock someone later. I would have kept walking. Should have kept walking. But then someone turned around and said, "Oh my God, finally someone interesting signed up," while looking directly at me. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. I pushed through the small crowd, and there it was in handwriting I knew better than my own. My name. My full name. Written in gel pen because my sister thinks bright colors are sophisticated. Next to it, in the same ink, Contemporary Dance Solo. Contemporary dance. I can barely walk upstairs without tripping over my own feet. I once got tangled in my bedsheets so badly my mom had to help me out. But there I was officially registered to perform interpretive movement in front of the entire 7th grade, plus parents, plus probably someone's annoying little siblings with their tablets ready to record everything. The whispers started immediately. In middle school gossip moves faster than that time, the cafeteria served questionable fish sticks, and half the school spent the afternoon in the nurse's office. By 3rd period, everyone knew about my upcoming dance debut. By lunch, the rumors had evolved. Someone said I was doing ballet. Another person claimed I was breakdancing. One particularly creative storyteller suggested I was performing a tribute to dead pets. Behind me, someone whispered, "Finally crawling out of her cave, huh?" Laughter not loud, just enough to press into my back like a sharp thumbtack. My sister was waiting by my locker after school, leaning against the metal door like she owned the place. Mia has perfected this look of innocent confusion that she probably practices in the mirror. Wide eyes, slight head tilt, the kind of expression that says, "Who me?" while her brain calculates exactly how much damage she's caused. "So I heard you're performing at the talent show," she said sweetly. "That's so brave of you." Brave. Right? Like signing someone up for public humiliation without their knowledge is some kind of motivational coaching. "You signed me up," I said, keeping my voice flat. "For dancing." "Did I?" She examined her nails like they contained the secrets of the universe. "Everyone deserves their moment, right?" Her voice dripped with sugar, but I could hear the mockery underneath. She didn't need to roll her eyes or nudge anyone. Her smile did all the work. "You can just tell them it was a mistake," she continued. "Say you never meant to sign up. Everyone will understand." There it was. The trap. She didn't just want to embarrass me. She wanted me to embarrass myself by backing out. Wanted me to prove that I was exactly the coward she thought I was. Wanted to sit in the audience with her friends and whisper about how predictable I am. School talent shows are ridiculous anyway. They're basically a showcase for kids who take expensive lessons and parents who peaked in high school. Half the acts are the same 3 pop songs everyone knows. The other half are awkward magic tricks that nobody asked for. The whole thing gets recorded on someone's phone and uploaded to social media where it lives forever as evidence that middle school should be illegal. But walking away would hand Mia exactly what she wanted. She'd spent years perfecting these little cruelties. The comments about my clothes that weren't quite mean enough to get in trouble for. The way she'd invite friends over and then suggest I hang out somewhere else. the casual mentions of my failures at family dinners. This was supposed to be her masterpiece. The moment she finally broke me down, completely. Standing there by my locker, watching her fake innocent smile, I realized something. I was angrier than I was scared. Not brave angry. Not ready to conquer the world angry. Just tired of being someone's punchline angry. The kind of anger that makes you do stupid things because the alternative is letting someone else win. I'm not backing out, I said. Her smile faltered for just a second. What? I'm doing it. The dance. The whole thing. You don't know how to dance. Guess I'll learn. She recovered quickly, putting the confused, innocent look back on. I mean, if you want to make a fool of yourself, that's your choice. I just thought you'd be smarter than that. Smarter would have been scratching my name off the list. Smarter would have been telling the truth to the talent show coordinator. Smarter would have been letting my sister have her little victory so she'd move on to torturing someone else. But smart wasn't going to solve my Mia problem. She'd just find another way to prove I was weak. Another situation where I'd choose the safe option and confirm everything she believed about me. At least this way I'd go down swinging instead of just lying down and letting her walk all over me. 3 days, I said. That's how long I have to prepare. 3 days to learn contemporary dance from scratch. She was trying to sound concerned, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. That's not very long. Long enough. She shrugged and walked away, probably already planning where she'd sit to get the best view of my inevitable disaster. But as I watched her go, I felt something shift. Not confidence exactly. More like stubborn determination. The same feeling I got when someone said I couldn't finish a book because it was too advanced, or when teachers assumed I wouldn't understand something because I never spoke up in class. Spite is a powerful motivator. Maybe not the healthiest one, but definitely effective. Mia thought she was pushing me toward humiliation. Instead, she'd accidentally pushed me toward the one thing that might actually save me from being invisible forever. Sometimes the people trying to hurt you end up giving you exactly what you need. The walk home felt different. Every step carried the weight of what I'd just committed to. 3 days to transform from someone who trips over flat surfaces into a contemporary dancer. 3 days to prove I wasn't the coward my sister thought I was. 3 days to figure out if stubborn determination could somehow overcome complete lack of talent. 3 days of panic and YouTube University. That night, I locked my bedroom door and opened my laptop. If I was going to humiliate myself, I might as well do it properly. YouTube became my desperate classroom, and I was the worst student it had ever seen. I started with contemporary dance for beginners, which sounded promising until the instructor began with what she called a simple warm-up sequence that looked like someone having a seizure in slow motion. The woman in the video moved like water. Fluid. Graceful. Her arms flowed into positions that seemed effortless while she smiled serenely at the camera. Just let your body express what you're feeling, she said as she twisted into a shape that defied several laws of physics. I tried to copy her first move and immediately banged my elbow against my desk chair. My body was expressing frustration and mild panic. Probably not what she had in mind. Hours passed in a blur of failed attempts and increasingly desperate searches. I found a video promising signature moves to make you stand out, which seemed perfect until I realized their definition of signature move was what normal people would call showing off. The instructor demonstrated something called a spiral descent that required lowering yourself to the floor while keeping your arms extended and your back perfectly straight. I attempted it once and got stuck halfway down like a broken elevator. My signature move turned into me just lying on my carpet, wondering how I'd gotten there. Between tutorial disasters, I retreated to my mom's old keyboard in the corner of my room. She'd left a cassette tape of piano music from her college days, and I played it on loop, trying to find some rhythm in my bones. The melody was simple and repetitive, but it gave me something to move to that wasn't the overly enthusiastic instructors telling me to feel the music in my soul while I struggled to remember which foot was which. The next 2 days blurred together in a montage of minor victories and major failures. I could do a basic step-touch combination without falling over. I could lift my arms above my head in what resembled an artistic gesture. I could turn in a circle without getting dizzy as long as I went slowly and focused on a fixed point. These were not exactly the building blocks of a show-stopping performance. Dinner became a minefield of Mia's passive-aggressive commentary. She'd mentioned how nervous she'd be if she had to perform in front of people, how she'd practiced for months before her piano recital last year, how some people were just naturally suited for the spotlight, while others were better behind the scenes. Mom and Dad nodded along, thinking she was being supportive while I pushed peas around my plate and planned my next practice session. I saw in the news that stage fright can cause people to freeze up completely, Mia said Thursday night while reaching for the salt. Like their minds just go blank and they forget everything they practiced. How interesting, I said, without looking up from my mashed potatoes. I'm sure that won't happen to you, though. You seem really prepared. She had no idea how unprepared I actually was, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of knowing. Instead, I excused myself and went back to my room where every mirror had become my enemy. The bathroom mirror caught me practicing arm movements while brushing my teeth. The hallway mirror reflected my attempts at graceful walking, which looked more like a duck with coordination issues. Even my bedroom mirror seemed to judge me as I worked through the 3 moves I'd managed to learn without injuring myself. The internal debate was constant. Should I stick with safe, basic movements that wouldn't embarrass me too badly, or risk trying something ambitious that might actually impress people if I didn't fall flat on my face? Safe meant boring. Ambitious meant potential disaster. There was no middle ground between invisible and catastrophic. By Friday morning, I'd accepted a harsh truth. 2.5 days of frantic preparation had taught me exactly 3 things. First, that professional dancers make everything look easier than it actually is. Second, that my body had opinions about movement that rarely aligned with my intentions. Third, that confidence and delusion were separated by the thinnest possible line. But something had shifted during those 3 days of desperate practice. Not my actual dancing ability, which remained questionable at best. Not my coordination, which seemed to have gotten worse from all the attempts. What changed was my relationship with the inevitable disaster I was about to create. Wednesday night, I'd been terrified of looking foolish. Thursday, I'd been focused on learning enough moves to fake competence. By Friday morning, I'd accepted that competence wasn't happening. I was going to look exactly like what I was. Someone who'd learned to dance from YouTube in 3 days. Someone who had no business being on a stage, but was going to be there anyway. The realization was oddly liberating. I couldn't compete with the kids who'd been taking lessons since kindergarten. I couldn't suddenly develop natural rhythm or perfect technique, but I could be authentically myself, even if myself was awkward and unpolished and completely out of place in a talent show. My signature move wasn't going to be a perfect spiral descent or a flawless leap. It was going to be the fact that I showed up at all. That I'd spent 3 days learning basic movements from strangers on the internet because my sister thought she could break me down. That I'd chosen stubborn determination over safe retreat. I had 3 dance moves and approximately 12 hours before showtime. It wasn't enough to be good, but it might be enough to be something else entirely. Something that had nothing to do with technical skill and everything to do with what happens when you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be real. The art of awkward confidence. The next morning brought a different kind of clarity. I couldn't outdance the kids who'd been taking lessons since they could walk, but I could do something else entirely. I could be so committed to being bad at dancing that it became its own kind of performance. The strategy crystallized while I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom mirror. Instead of trying to hide my awkwardness, I'd lean into it, make it obvious that I knew exactly how ridiculous I looked, turn my lack of skill into the actual point of the performance. It was backwards logic, but sometimes backwards is the only way forward when you're completely out of options. The line between confidence and delusion is thinner than people want to admit. From the outside, they probably look identical. Someone who genuinely believes they're amazing and someone who's pretending to believe they're amazing both walk with the same stride. Both smile the same way. Both take up space like they belong there. The audience can't see the internal monologue that separates the two. I started practicing my new approach during lunch period. The media room became my rehearsal space where I could close the door and work on what I was calling my awkward but committed style. It meant doing my basic step-touch combination like I was proud of it. throwing my arms up in that vague artistic gesture like it was exactly what I'd intended, spinning slowly with a facial expression that suggested I was having deep emotional moments instead of just trying not to fall over. The key was selling it completely. No apologetic smiles or self-deprecating shrugs. No signals that I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. Just full commitment to every questionable movement choice. It felt like wearing a costume made of pure stubbornness. The media room had this low electrical hum that became the soundtrack to my transformation. I'd practiced my routine to that steady buzz, working on making every awkward gesture look intentional. The janitor walked past the window once while I was mid-gesture, my arms extended in what the YouTube tutorial had called an expressive reach, but probably looked like I was trying to catch an invisible butterfly. He stopped, watched for a moment, then gave me the smallest nod before continuing down the hallway. Not mocking, not pitying, just acknowledging that I was doing something and committing to it. That tiny moment of recognition changed everything. Middle schoolers can smell fear from 3 hallways away. They have this instinct for weakness that's sharper than anything else about them, but confidence throws off their radar even when that confidence is completely manufactured. They don't know what to do with someone who owns their weirdness instead of trying to hide it. Word had apparently spread about my unconventional preparation methods. Kids found excuses to walk past the media room. Some pretended to look for equipment. Others weren't even subtle about it. They just stood there watching me work through my routine like I was a particularly interesting zoo exhibit. The attention could have been mortifying, but instead it felt like market research. I was testing whether my approach would actually work on a real audience, whether commitment to awkwardness could overcome actual awkwardness, whether people would laugh with me instead of at me if I made it clear that I was in on the joke. The responses were encouraging. Nobody looked disgusted or secondhand embarrassed. They looked curious, entertained. A few even seemed impressed by the sheer audacity of what I was attempting. One girl gave me a thumbs up through the window. Another mouthed, "Go for it," while her friend nodded enthusiastically. By Thursday, someone had started calling me the anti-performer, and somehow it stuck. David Park used it first, not as an insult, but as a description. "She's like the anti-performer," he told his friends while I practiced my dramatic floor moment in the hallway, making fun of dance while also doing it. The label spread faster than cafeteria gossip. Instead of feeling insulted, I felt understood. That was exactly what I was attempting. My comfort level with being uncomfortable was growing exponentially. Each practice session in front of accidental audiences made the next one easier. Not because I was getting better at dancing, but because I was getting better at not caring that I wasn't getting better at dancing. The distinction mattered more than I'd expected. The strategy was working in ways I hadn't anticipated. Instead of trying to make the audience forget I didn't belong there, I was making them glad I didn't belong there. Instead of apologizing for taking up space, I was celebrating the fact that I was taking up space differently than everyone else. Instead of hoping they wouldn't notice my flaws, I was making my flaws the entire point. Friday's final practice session happened in the actual auditorium during study hall. The stage was empty, and I figured I should get used to the space before showtime. I ran through my routine once completely unbothered by the fact that my movements looked nothing like what professional dancers would consider dancing. I'd found my own category: determined amateur, enthusiastic beginner, proud weirdo. A few kids filtered in during the final minutes of study hall. They sat in the back rows and watched me finish my routine. When I took my bow, they actually clapped. Not the polite golf clap you give to someone you feel sorry for. Real applause, the kind that says they're looking forward to seeing what happens next. Walking off that stage, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not confidence exactly, but something adjacent to it. The knowledge that I'd found a way to be myself in front of other people without apologizing for it. That being weird was only a problem if you tried to pretend you weren't weird. That owning your particular brand of strange was infinitely more powerful than failing to be normal. My sister had tried to set me up for humiliation by putting me somewhere I didn't belong. Instead, she'd accidentally given me permission to belong exactly as I was. But as Friday afternoon approached, I started noticing something in Mia's expression that hadn't been there before. something that looked suspiciously like concern. The sister's growing concern. She'd been watching me all week with the intensity of someone monitoring a science experiment. That wasn't producing expected results. By Friday afternoon, her carefully constructed plan was showing cracks. She'd expected me to panic by Wednesday, to come crawling to her begging for help getting out of the mess she'd created. Instead, I was walking through the halls with something that looked dangerously close to purpose. She cornered me after sixth period near the water fountains where she could speak quietly without drawing attention. Her usual crowd of followers hung back far enough to give us space, but close enough to witness whatever breakdown she was expecting to orchestrate. "So tomorrow's the big day," she said with that same sugar-sweet tone that had become her signature. "Are you nervous? You seem nervous." I wasn't nervous in the way she meant. Terrified of making a fool of myself? Sure. But also weirdly excited about making a fool of myself on my own terms instead of hers. "I'm ready," I said. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. Long enough for me to catch the confusion underneath. This wasn't the script she'd written in her head. I was supposed to be begging her to fix this by now. Supposed to be grateful when she offered to help me back out gracefully. "Ready," she repeated slowly. That's great. I mean, some people practice for years before they feel ready to perform, but 3 days is probably enough time to learn contemporary dance from scratch. She was fishing for doubt, trying to plant seeds of insecurity that would bloom into full panic by showtime. But I'd already moved past caring whether I was good enough. "I've learned what I need to know," I said. "Which is what exactly?" "I mean, I'd hate for you to get up there and freeze. That would be so embarrassing. For both of us, really, since everyone knows we're sisters." There it was, the real concern. Not that I'd humiliate myself, but that I'd humiliate her by association. She'd crafted this prank to make me look weak, but hadn't considered how my weakness might make her look cruel. Sometimes the bully suffers when their victim suffers too, obviously. Bullies need their victims to play specific roles. The victim is supposed to cower, to beg, to eventually break down in a satisfying way that confirms the bully's power. When victims refuse to follow the script, everything gets messy. "I won't freeze," I said. "How can you be sure? Stage fright affects everyone differently." Her friends were watching now with the kind of attention that suggested they were picking up on the tension. Mia's confidence was usually unshakable. Seeing her work this hard to convince me of something was unusual enough to draw their focus. "I'm just saying maybe you should have a backup plan, in case things don't go the way you're hoping." "What kind of backup plan?" "Well, you could always say you're sick tomorrow. Food poisoning. Nobody questions food poisoning. Or you could just be honest and tell them it was all a mistake." She was offering me an exit strategy wrapped in fake concern, making it sound like she was trying to protect me when really she was trying to protect herself. If I backed out, she'd get her victory without the mess of watching me potentially succeed. "I'm not backing out," I said. The words hit her like cold water. Her expression shifted from fake concern to genuine worry. Not worry about me. Worry about what I might actually accomplish up there. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to serve as a side dish. Mom asked about my performance, and I gave basic answers while Mia sat across from me stabbing her pasta with unnecessary force. Dad mentioned how proud he was that I was trying something new, how it took courage to put yourself out there artistically. Mia's jaw got tighter with each supportive comment. "Some people aren't really built for performing, though," she said during dessert. "Not everyone can handle being the center of attention." "Mia," Mom said with mild disapproval. "That's not very supportive." "I'm being realistic. I don't want her to get her hopes up and then feel worse when things don't work out." But her concern felt hollow. She was trying to plant doubt in front of our parents while maintaining plausible deniability about her motives. The problem was that doubt only works when the person already believes they should be ashamed of trying. Later that night, I heard Mia on the phone with one of her friends. Her voice carried through the thin wall between our rooms. "I don't know what she's thinking. She's acting like she actually wants to do this." A pause while her friend responded. "Now I can't just tell them to take her off the list." that would look bad. Another pause. I mean, maybe she'll be fine. Maybe it won't be as bad as I thought. The doubt in her voice was new. For the first time since this whole thing started, she wasn't sure how it would end. She'd expected easy victory and instead got complicated uncertainty. The prank was taking on a life of its own in ways she hadn't planned for. Guilt was creeping in around the edges of her confidence. She'd set something in motion that she couldn't control anymore, created a situation where her victory might actually turn into my breakthrough. By Saturday morning, she'd reached what looked like genuine panic. I found her in the kitchen staring at her cereal like it contained answers to questions she didn't want to ask. "You know you don't have to go through with this," she said without looking up. "I could call the school. Tell them you're sick." For the first time, her offer sounded genuine instead of manipulative. Like she was actually trying to save me from something instead of maneuvering me into it. The realization that she might have accidentally helped me was dawning on her slowly. "I want to do it," I said. She looked up, then really looked at me instead of through me the way she usually did. Something in my face must have convinced her that I meant it, because her expression shifted to something I'd never seen before. Not quite respect, but recognition. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's refusing to be broken by someone who expected you to shatter. Mia had tried to make me a victim and instead accidentally made me someone who wouldn't accept that role anymore. Rehearsal Day Disasters and Unexpected Allies. Saturday afternoon dress rehearsal was supposed to be a calm run-through where everyone figured out their cues and worked out small technical details. Instead, it turned into a masterclass in why middle school productions shouldn't be trusted with anything more complicated than a kazoo orchestra. The auditorium looked like a tornado had swept through a craft store and decided to redecorate. Half the stage lights flickered randomly like they were having seizures. The sound system emitted a constant low hum that made everyone sound like they were speaking through a broken radio. Streamers hung odd angles from the ceiling where someone had clearly given up halfway through decorating. The whole setup screamed, held together by duct tape and desperate prayers. I was third in the lineup, which gave me plenty of time to watch disasters unfold before my turn. Jenny Martinez's piano accompaniment track started playing at double speed, turning her ballad into what sounded like a chipmunk having an emotional breakdown. The tech crews scrambled around, pressing random buttons while Jenny stood frozen on stage, looking like she was about to cry or laugh or possibly both. Tyler Johnson's magic act went sideways when his trick deck of cards scattered across the stage floor like confetti. He spent 2 minutes crawling around collecting them while maintaining eye contact with the audience and pretending this was all part of the show. His confident patter about making objects disappear became unintentionally hilarious when the only thing that actually disappeared was his dignity. By the time they called my name, the backstage area buzzed with nervous energy and barely contained panic. Mrs. Chen, the drama teacher, clutched her clipboard like it was the only thing keeping her sanity intact. She developed a slight eye twitch that got worse every time something went wrong, which meant it was basically constant now. I walked onto the stage and immediately stepped on the extension cord for the spotlight. The entire left side of the stage plunged into darkness while the spotlight swung wildly like a disco ball having a breakdown. I untangled my foot and kept walking while the tech crew dove under the stage trying to fix whatever I'd broken. My music started at the wrong volume, blasting through the speakers so loud it probably violated several noise ordinances. I'd chosen an instrumental track that was supposed to be subtle and atmospheric. Instead, it sounded like a movie soundtrack for a film about robots taking over the world. The tech kid frantically twisted dials until the volume dropped to something that wouldn't cause permanent hearing damage. Then my shirt got caught on the microphone stand that wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to gracefully incorporate the obstacle into my routine, but ended up doing an awkward dance around it like I was playing an invisible game of limbo. The microphone tilted at increasingly dangerous angles while I worked my way free. That's when something unexpected happened. Instead of the horrified silence I'd been bracing for, people started laughing. Not at me exactly, but with me. Like they could see that I was rolling with the chaos instead of being destroyed by it. My face must have shown my confusion because someone called out, "You're doing great, keep going." It was Ashley Kim from my English class. The same Ashley who'd never spoken to me directly before this week. She was sitting in the third row with a couple of other kids I recognized but didn't really know. They were all watching with genuine interest instead of the secondhand embarrassment I'd expected. "Work with it," called out Marcus Chen from somewhere in the back. "Make it part of the show. Make it part of the show." The idea hit me like lightning wrapped in common sense. Instead of fighting against the technical disasters, I could embrace them. Turn the malfunctions into features instead of bugs. Make my authentic reactions to the chaos become the actual entertainment. I untangled myself from the microphone stand with exaggerated ceremony like I was performing surgery. When the spotlight swung past me again, I followed it across the stage like I was chasing a butterfly. When my music cut out completely for 30 seconds, I kept dancing to the rhythm in my head and shrugged at the audience like we were all in on the joke together. The response was immediate and encouraging. Real applause broke out when I managed to incorporate a loose floorboard into what looked like an intentional dramatic stomp. Kids were sitting forward in their seats instead of checking their phones. They seemed genuinely curious about what would go wrong next and how I'd handle it. "That's your thing," said David Park during the break between acts. I barely knew David beyond the fact that he sat 2 rows behind me in math class and always had perfect handwriting. "You're like the anti-performer. You make disasters look intentional." The anti-performer. I liked that description. It captured exactly what I was going for without making it sound like I was trying too hard to be different. Just different enough to be interesting. Sarah Martinez joined our impromptu backstage conference. "You should totally play up the technical problems tomorrow night. Like, make them expect things to go wrong, and then when they do, you're ready for it." These were kids I'd shared classes with for 2 years without having real conversations beyond borrowing pencils and comparing homework answers. But here they were, offering genuine advice and encouragement like we'd been friends forever. Like my willingness to make a fool of myself had somehow made me worth talking to. My second run-through went smoother technically, but somehow felt less interesting. The spotlight stayed put. My music played at the right volume. No wardrobe malfunctions or unexpected obstacles. But I missed the spontaneous energy that came from dealing with the unexpected. The moments when I had to think fast and adapt were more engaging than the parts I'd rehearsed. Walking off stage after the second run, I realized something important. My biggest weaknesses had somehow become my greatest strengths when I stopped trying to hide them. The disasters weren't ruining my performance. They were making it memorable. But the real test would come tomorrow night in front of an actual audience. And first, I had to survive whatever conversation was waiting for me at home. The night before, family revelations. Dinner that night felt different. Mom asked about rehearsal, and I gave her the basic details while Mia sat across from me pushing food around her plate. She kept glancing up like she wanted to say something, but couldn't figure out how to start. The silence stretched until it became obvious that something was happening between us that our parents couldn't see. After we cleared the dishes, I found Mia sitting on my bed when I got back from brushing my teeth. Not perched on the edge like she was planning to leave quickly. Actually sitting cross-legged in the middle like she intended to stay for a real conversation. She'd never done that before. Usually our bedroom interactions consisted of her standing in my doorway long enough to deliver whatever cutting comment she'd prepared. "So tomorrow's your big day," she said without her usual sugarcoating. Just flat honesty, which was somehow more unsettling than her fake sweetness. Yeah, I sat down at my desk chair and waited for whatever psychological warfare she'd planned for the night before my performance. "I never thought you'd actually go through with it," she said quietly. "When I signed you up, I figured you'd back out by Wednesday, Thursday at the latest." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. She'd expected me to crumble under pressure and give her the satisfaction of being right about how weak I was. "But you didn't back out," she continued. "You actually practiced. People are saying you might be good. People are saying I might be good, or people are saying I might be entertainingly bad." She almost smiled. "Both, probably. But they're talking about you. That's new." It was new. For 2 years, I'd been basically invisible in the hallways. The kind of person teachers forgot to call on and classmates forgot to invite to things. Mia's prank had accidentally made me someone worth paying attention to. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. The words came out wrong, like she'd practiced them, but they still sounded foreign in her mouth. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "What did you mean for it to do?" She picked at my bedspread and avoided eye contact. "I don't know. Make you panic, maybe. Give you a reason to hate me that was actually fair instead of just hating me because I exist." That caught me off guard. I'd assumed her cruelty came from some kind of superiority complex. The idea that it might come from insecurity instead reframed everything I thought I understood about our relationship. "I don't hate you because you exist," I said. "You don't really like me either." She was right. I didn't particularly like her, but I'd never thought about why beyond the obvious fact that she was mean to me. Now I wondered if the meanness was her way of creating distance because she expected me to reject her eventually anyway. "You make it hard to like you," I said. "I know." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Two people who'd shared a house for 13 years finally having an honest conversation about why they barely tolerated each other. Family dynamics are weird that way. You can live with someone forever and never really understand what's happening inside their head until one random night when all the pretending gets too exhausting to maintain. "Why did you really sign me up?" I asked. She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than usual. "Because you're better at everything than you think you are. And I wanted to prove it, but I didn't know how to just tell you that." "So you thought public humiliation would help?" "I thought maybe if you had to do something scary, you'd realize you could handle scary things." I didn't think about how mean it was. I just thought about the end result. It was possibly the most twisted logic I'd ever heard, but it was also weirdly touching. She tried to help me by putting me in an impossible situation. "That's a terrible way to help someone," I told her. "I know that now. You could have just said you thought I was capable of more than I was doing. When have we ever talked about serious stuff like that?" She had a point. Our conversations usually stayed surface level when they happened at all. We'd never developed the vocabulary for deeper discussions about potential and self-worth and sibling relationships. "I could still help you get out of it," she said. "I could call Mrs. Chen in the morning and say you're sick. Food poisoning. Something that would last exactly one day so you wouldn't have to make up schoolwork." She was offering me an escape route. Not because she wanted to humiliate me further, but because she was genuinely worried she'd pushed me into something that would hurt me. "Or I could mess with the tech setup," she continued. "Make sure your music doesn't work or the lights go out during your performance. Give you a reason to stop that isn't your fault. You'd sabotage the show for me?" "I'd sabotage anything for you if it meant fixing this mess I made." It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I'd ever gotten from her. Not just sorry for the immediate prank, but sorry for the pattern of behavior that had led to it. "I don't want you to sabotage anything," I said. "You want to go through with it?" "I want to see what happens." She studied my face like she was trying to figure out if I was being brave or stupid. "What if you mess up? What if everyone laughs at you?" "Then everyone laughs at me, and I keep dancing anyway." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite respect, but recognition that I'd changed during this week of unwanted preparation. That I'd found something in myself that hadn't been there before. "You're braver than I thought," she said. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Like the distinction between courage and exhaustion was something she understood better than I'd expected. We were both tired of playing roles that didn't fit us anymore. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, I'd be standing on a stage in front of half the school doing something I'd learned from YouTube tutorials. The smart thing would be to take Mia's offer and fake sick. The safe thing would be to disappear into the background and let everyone forget this whole thing ever happened. But I'd spent the week discovering that sometimes the smart thing and the right thing aren't the same. Sometimes you have to choose between protecting yourself and finding out who you actually are when nobody's telling you who to be. By morning, I'd made my choice. Whatever happened on that stage was going to happen with me, fully committed to seeing it through. Showtime, the moment of truth. The auditorium doors felt heavier than they should have as I pushed through them into the backstage area. Concrete walls painted that specific shade of institutional beige that screamed. I sat on a folding chair that had seen better decades and tried to remember why I'd thought this was a good idea. My hands were shaking just enough to make me annoyed at my own nervous system. The sounds from the auditorium filtered through the thin walls like audio from another dimension. Applause for whoever was performing before me. The muffled voice of Mrs. Chen introducing each act with forced enthusiasm. Laughter at moments that were probably supposed to be serious. The whole production had that slightly chaotic energy of a middle school event, held together by sheer determination and several rolls of duct tape. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, which seemed unnecessary given that my heart was obviously still working. Time had entered some kind of weird suspension where minutes felt like hours, but also like they were moving too fast. The clock on the wall showed 7:43. Then 7:43, then somehow 7:51, like it had decided to skip forward just to mess with me. Through a gap in the curtain, I caught a glimpse of the packed auditorium. Every seat was filled. Parents with cameras ready to document their children's brief moments of glory or humiliation. Younger siblings forced to attend who were probably playing games on their phones. Students from my grade scattered throughout the crowd like landmines, waiting to explode into gossip the second something interesting happened. The sight should have been reassuring. All these people who'd shown up to support their friends and family members. Instead, it felt like staring into the mouth of a very large, very judgmental beast. Every face was a potential critic. Every phone was a potential recording device that would preserve whatever disaster I was about to create for digital eternity. Mrs. Chen appeared beside me with her clipboard and her slightly manic smile. "You're up next, sweetie. How are you feeling?" "Terrified," I said, because lying seemed pointless at this stage. That's completely normal. Just remember to breathe and have fun with it. Have fun with it, right? Like fun was something you could just decide to have in the middle of a panic attack. But her intentions were good, even if her advice was basically useless. She hurried away to manage whatever crisis was unfolding on the other side of the stage. I stood up and walked to the edge of the curtain. One more peek at the audience. There was Mia sitting in the fourth row next to her parents. She looked more nervous than I felt, which was almost funny. Like she was the one about to perform instead of just watching her prank play out. Dad had his phone ready to record everything. Mom was scanning the program trying to figure out when my act would start. The kid before me finished his guitar solo to enthusiastic applause. Mrs. Chen walked onto the stage with her microphone and started her introduction. Our next performer is someone who's shown incredible courage by stepping outside her comfort zone. Please welcome to the stage for a contemporary dance performance. This was it. No more planning or worrying or second guessing. In about 30 seconds, I'd be standing in front of everyone I'd ever shared a classroom with doing something I'd learned from YouTube videos in my bedroom. The absurdity of the situation hit me like a slap of cold air. I walked toward the stage entrance and stopped at the edge of the curtain. My final moment of anonymity. Once I stepped through that gap, I'd be completely visible to everyone who'd ever ignored me or forgotten my name or wondered why I was so quiet all the time. They'd all see exactly who I was when I thought no one was watching. The stage lights were brighter than I'd expected. Not warm bright like sunlight, but harsh bright like being interrogated by very enthusiastic detectives. They created this weird affect where I couldn't see individual faces in the audience, but I could feel their attention like heat from a fire. 300 people all focused on the same spot where I happened to be standing. I walked to the center of the stage and found my starting position. The auditorium was completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and someone's phone buzzing somewhere in the back. Even the younger siblings had stopped playing games to see what was about to happen. The anticipation was thick enough to cut with a knife. My music started, the same instrumental track I'd practiced with all week. But it sounded different through the auditorium speakers. Bigger. More official. like it was announcing something important instead of just providing background noise for my bedroom rehearsals. The moment had arrived to find out whether 3 days of YouTube tutorials and stubborn determination could somehow transform into something worth watching. I took a breath and prepared to show 300 people exactly what contemporary dance looked like when performed by someone who had absolutely no idea what they were doing, but was committed to doing it anyway. The dance that broke all the rules. The first step I took was just a walk. Not a graceful glide across polished floors like real dancers do, but an actual walk. Step by step, like I was heading to the grocery store instead of expressing some deep artistic vision. The audience wasn't sure what to make of it. I could feel their confusion radiating from the seats like heat from pavement. Then I started my step-touch combination. Right foot steps to the side. Left foot follows. Repeat. The same basic movement every beginner learns, except I was doing it with the kind of focus usually reserved for diffusing bombs. Each step was deliberate, intentional, like I was claiming every square inch of that stage through sheer determination rather than skill. My arms came up in what the YouTube tutorial had called an expressive reach. In reality, it looked like I was trying to hug the air or possibly surrender to invisible police officers, but I committed to it completely. Sold every awkward angle like it was exactly what I'd planned. The audience started leaning forward in their seats. Not because the movement was beautiful, but because my conviction was impossible to ignore. Traditional dance relies on technique, precise positioning, years of training that teach your body to move in ways that defy gravity and common sense. I had none of that. What I had was 3 days of bedroom practice and a stubborn refusal to apologize for being exactly who I was. Turns out that combination is more entertaining than anyone expected. The first real crowd reaction came when I attempted my signature slow spin. I'd practiced this move hundreds of times, but the stage floor was more slippery than my bedroom carpet. Instead of a controlled turn, I got something that looked like a washing machine in slow motion. My arms windmilled slightly to maintain balance while my face showed genuine surprise at the physics involved. The audience laughed. Not cruel laughter, but delighted laughter. The kind that says they're enjoying the ride instead of judging the driver. Someone near the back actually clapped. Just 3 quick claps, but it felt like validation. My internal monologue kicked into overdrive. Okay, that worked. Whatever that was, it worked. Keep doing things that work. I moved into my floor work sequence, which was supposed to involve gracefully lowering myself to the ground. Instead, it became an elaborate negotiation between my body and gravity. I ended up in a position that was part sitting, part crouching, with my arms extended like I was presenting something important to the audience. Maybe my dignity. Maybe my complete lack of shame. Either way, they seemed to appreciate the gesture. Getting back up was even more interesting. I'd never figured out how to make rising from the floor look elegant, so I just made it look determined. Pushed myself up with visible effort and brushed off my clothes like I'd accomplished something significant. The audience was fully engaged now. Phones were out, but not to mock me. They were recording something they'd never seen before. The energy in the room shifted from polite attention to active participation. People weren't just watching my performance, they were rooting for it. I could hear whispered encouragement from the front rows. Someone's mom said, "Oh, honey," in a voice that sounded proud instead of pitying. A group of 8th graders started clapping along to my music, which was both helpful and terrifying. My running commentary kept me grounded while chaos unfolded around me. Okay, that step worked. This turn feels wrong, but commit to it anyway. Smile like you meant to do that. The audience can't hear your thoughts, so make your face tell the story you want them to believe. Act like someone who belongs here, and maybe they'll believe it too. I could see the exact moment when even the skeptical audience members surrendered to what was happening. It was during my interpretive arm sequence where I basically conducted an invisible orchestra while walking in a large circle. The movement made no sense from a technical standpoint, but it looked like I was having the time of my life. Joy is contagious that way. When someone is genuinely happy to be doing something ridiculous, it makes everyone else want to be happy too. My sister sat in the 4th row with her mouth slightly open, not in horror, but in amazement, like she was watching someone she'd never met before, which, in a way, she was. The person on stage wasn't the quiet girl who hid in her bedroom. This was someone who took up space without apologizing for it. Someone who turned awkwardness into art through sheer force of personality. The finale involved all my signature moves combined into what I generously called a routine. Step touch across the stage. Expressive arm gestures toward the ceiling. The slow spin that had become my trademark. A dramatic floor moment followed by a determined rise. Each element was exactly as awkward as it had been individually, but somehow the combination created something that was more than the sum of its parts. I ended with my arms raised above my head in what looked like victory. Not because I'd executed perfect technique, but because I'd survived 3 minutes of being completely myself in front of 300 people. The pose was equal parts triumphant and exhausted. Like I just finished running a marathon that happened to involve interpretive movement. My authentic joy in movement had become infectious throughout the auditorium. People were smiling, not at me, but with me. They got the joke even though it wasn't really a joke. They understood that passion could be more entertaining than perfection. That commitment to being yourself was worth more than years of technical training. Standing there in the stage lights, I realized something important. Technique gets you respect, but authenticity gets you connection. People don't remember the dancers who moved perfectly. They remember the ones who moved like they meant it. And I had definitely meant every awkward, the unexpected standing ovation. The sound hit me like a physical force. Not polite golf clapping or scattered applause teachers have to encourage. Real applause. Enthusiastic applause. The kind that starts with a few people and spreads through the auditorium like wildfire until everyone is clapping because they genuinely want to clap. I stood there in the stage lights, trying to process what was happening. People were standing up. Not just my parents, who were obligated to support me, or Mrs. Chen, who had to pretend every performance was wonderful. Random classmates I barely knew were getting out of their seats and clapping like I'd just accomplished something extraordinary. My brain kept trying to find the mistake. The misunderstanding that would explain why 300 people were cheering for someone who just spent 3 minutes doing basic movements with questionable technique. Success feels different when you weren't expecting it. When you prepare for disaster and get triumph, instead, your emotional system doesn't know how to process the information. I'd spent the entire week bracing for humiliation, planning how I'd handle the inevitable mockery, figuring out which route to take to my locker afterward to avoid the worst of the gossip. I had no mental framework for what to do when people actually liked what they'd seen. The applause kept going. Someone near the back started whooping. A group of 6th graders began chanting my name like I was a rock star instead of someone who learned to dance from YouTube tutorials. The judges were clapping too, which seemed like it might be against some kind of professional code, but they didn't seem to care about maintaining objectivity anymore. I found Mia in the 4th row. She was on her feet, clapping harder than anyone else, with tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears or embarrassed tears, but proud tears. The kind that come when you realize you've witnessed something special, even if you can't quite explain what made it special. Her expression was pure amazement mixed with something that looked like respect. She was seeing her quiet sister as someone completely different for the first time. My parents looked shocked in the best possible way. Dad had stopped recording because he was too busy applauding to hold his phone steady. Mom had her hand over her mouth like she couldn't believe what she was watching. They'd expected to sit through a well-intentioned disaster and instead got to watch their daughter discover something powerful about herself. The standing ovation lasted longer than my actual performance. Mrs. Chen had to wave her hands to get people to sit down so the show could continue. Even then, scattered applause kept breaking out like aftershocks from an earthquake. People were talking excitedly to each other instead of settling into quiet attention for the next act. The energy in the room had shifted permanently. Middle school social dynamics can change faster than weather patterns. One day you're invisible, and the next day, everyone knows your name. But usually those changes happen because of gossip or drama or someone doing something spectacularly stupid. I'd managed to shift my social position by doing something spectacularly authentic instead. Backstage was chaos in the best possible way. Kids I'd never spoken to were lining up to talk to me. Ashley Kim grabbed my hands and said, That was the coolest thing I've ever seen at one of these shows. Marcus Chen wanted to know if I was planning to audition for the spring musical. Sarah Martinez asked if I gave dance lessons, which was hilarious considering I'd started learning 3 days ago. Jessica Wong, the violin player, told me she'd been terrified to perform after my act because she knew nothing could top it. "You made everyone realize that being perfect isn't the point," she said. "You made it okay to just be human up there." Coming from someone with actual musical talent, that compliment meant more than she probably realized. The requests for friendship came fast and steady. Kids who'd never noticed me before suddenly wanted to sit with me at lunch, to partner with me on projects, to include me in conversations I'd always observed from the outside. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. Like I'd accidentally unlocked a social level I hadn't known existed. David Park asked if I wanted to join the drama club. "We need people who aren't afraid to look ridiculous," he said. "Most actors are too worried about being cool to really commit to a performance." The irony that my complete lack of coolness had somehow made me cool wasn't lost on me. Even the 8th graders were approaching me with something approaching respect. In middle school hierarchy, having older students acknowledge your existence is like receiving a presidential commendation. They treated me like I'd done something brave instead of something desperate. Like choosing to be authentically myself had required courage instead of just stubbornness. Standing there surrounded by classmates who suddenly saw me as someone worth knowing, I realized something important. I discovered that I was capable of things I'd never imagined. Not just performing in front of people, but commanding their attention through sheer force of personality, making them laugh with me instead of at me, turning my greatest weakness into my greatest strength. Mrs. Chen announced the next performer, and gradually people filtered back to their seats. But the energy remained different, expectant. Like everyone was hoping the next act would be equally willing to break the rules about what performances were supposed to look like. I'd accidentally raised the bar not for technical skill, but for authentic connection. Walking toward the exit, I caught one last glimpse of the stage where I'd just experienced the most terrifying and rewarding 3 minutes of my life. The lights were still bright. The floor was still slippery. But somehow, the space felt less intimidating now. Like I'd claimed it as my own through sheer determination to be exactly who I was. What I didn't realize in that moment was how much this single performance would change everything that came after. How Mia's cruel joke would become the foundation for a completely different version of myself. The aftermath, when pranks become gifts. 2 weeks later, I was still processing what had actually happened on that stage. The immediate aftermath was surreal in ways I hadn't expected. Monday morning, I walked into school bracing for the usual invisibility and instead got nods of recognition from kids I'd never spoken to. Not the kind of attention that comes from doing something embarrassing, but the kind that comes from doing something memorable. People remembered my name now. They had opinions about my performance. I'd gone from background character to someone worth discussing. My social standing had shifted in ways that defied middle school logic. Usually, popularity comes from being good at things everyone values. Sports, looking perfect, having the right clothes. I'd gained recognition by being spectacularly imperfect at something nobody cared about. But authenticity creates its own currency. People respond to someone who's genuinely themselves, even when themselves is awkward and unpracticed. My relationship with Mia changed overnight. The Cold War between us melted into something that resembled actual sisterhood. She'd seen me succeed at something she'd set up as my failure, and the experience had shifted how she saw me. I wasn't her weak little sister anymore. I was someone who could take her worst shot and turn it into something powerful. Our conversations became actual conversations instead of carefully constructed battles. She admitted she'd been jealous of how easily I could disappear when things got difficult, how I never seemed to care what other people thought. She'd mistaken my invisibility for confidence and had been trying to knock me down to her level of insecurity. Instead, she'd accidentally lifted me up to a level of confidence I'd never imagined reaching. "I thought you'd hate me forever after what I did," she said one night while we were both doing homework at the kitchen table. "But you turned it into something amazing. I don't know how you did that." "I didn't turn it into anything," I told her. "I just decided not to let it break me." She looked at me like I'd revealed some secret about the universe, Like refusing to be a victim was a superpower she'd never considered. Maybe for someone who'd spent years defining herself through other people's reactions, it was exactly that revolutionary. My newfound confidence spread to other areas faster than I'd expected. I raised my hand in English class to answer a question about symbolism, joined a conversation at lunch instead of just listening from the sidelines, volunteered to present my science project instead of hoping the teacher would skip over me. Small acts of bravery that would have been impossible a month earlier. The performance had taught me something crucial about fear. It never goes away completely, but it stops controlling you when you prove to yourself that you can act despite it. I was still nervous about speaking up in class, but I did it anyway. Still anxious about joining conversations, but I joined them anyway. The fear became background noise instead of the main soundtrack. Teachers started noticing me in ways they never had before. Mr. Rodriguez asked if I'd considered joining academic decathlon. Mrs. Chen suggested I audition for a speaking role in the spring play. Miss Patterson recommended me for the peer tutoring program. Suddenly, I was someone who got considered for opportunities instead of someone who got overlooked. Middle school social hierarchies are more fragile than anyone wants to admit. The invisible barriers between groups dissolve the moment someone does something unexpected. I'd crossed from the invisible kids to the interesting kids without changing anything about myself except my willingness to be seen. The categories that seemed so permanent were actually just suggestions everyone had agreed to follow. The most surprising change was my relationship with performing itself. What had started as forced participation had become something I actually enjoyed. Not because I'd gotten better at dancing, but because I'd gotten better at being myself in front of other people. The stage had become a place where I could be completely authentic without apology. 3 months after the talent show, I did something that would have been unthinkable before. I signed up for next year's show voluntarily. Not because Mia forced me or because I felt like I had something to prove. Because I wanted to see what I could create when I chose to be there instead of being pushed there. This time I picked singing. Not because I had a great voice, but because I had something to say, and singing felt like the right way to say it. I'd learned that technical skill mattered less than genuine connection. That audiences responded to honesty more than perfection. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act while afraid. Mia offered to help me prepare this time. Not because she felt guilty about her prank, but because she wanted to support something I'd chosen for myself. We spent evenings in my room working on breathing techniques and stage presence. The same space where I'd frantically learned dance moves from YouTube tutorials became a place where sisters helped each other grow. "You know, I never expected this to work out the way it did," she said during one of our practice sessions. "I thought I was setting you up to fail." "You were setting me up to fail," I said. "You just didn't realize failure was exactly what I needed." She laughed at that. Not mean laughter, but the kind that comes from recognizing an unexpected truth. Sometimes the people who try to hurt us accidentally teach us how strong we really are. Sometimes their worst intentions become our best opportunities. The talent show had taught me that authenticity is more powerful than perfection. That taking up space without apologizing is a skill worth developing. That courage isn't something you find, but something you practice until it becomes natural. What started as my sister's cruel joke had become the foundation for discovering who I really was when I stopped trying to hide. The stage taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. Growth happens in the spaces that scare us most. When someone pushes you toward your fears, they might accidentally push you toward your power. Looking back, I realized the most important moments of our lives rarely come from situations we choose for ourselves. They come from being forced into spaces that terrify us by people who think they know our limits better than we do. My sister thought she was exposing my weakness. Instead, she forced me to discover strength I didn't know existed. Maybe you have your own stage waiting. Some situation you're avoiding because it feels too scary or too public or too likely to end in disaster. Maybe someone's trying to push you toward something that makes your stomach drop. Maybe that's exactly where you need to go.